that was the first time that I actually kind of challenged hustle culture, seeing this leader who was respected, who had a top department, who had people who were constantly getting awarded and all of these different things. She was trusted in our organization as someone who could take teams, take departments, and create and build and make them much better than they even were, right? But this woman knew how to leave. She would leave and she wouldn't be answering emails. She would say, hey, you've got this.
Welcome back to Neuroconvergent Leadership, where we talk about effective communication and leadership, especially in the STEM workplace. I'm Jeremy Doran, and I really love to help great engineers make the transition into management and then leadership. Today, we have a guest who's going to talk about communication and leadership, which is fantastic. Welcome, Dr. Erin Wilson.
Thank you so much. I cannot be more excited to be here. So let's talk. I love talking about relationship intelligence and leadership. It's played just such an impactful role in my life and, of course, in my business as well. So I can't wait to share some nuggets with your leaders.
Perfect. So what is your business?
Yeah, so I am the CEO and principal consultant at Design Ideal Consulting, where I get the amazing opportunity to do engaging facilitations, some coaching, as well as workshops for cities, universities, and organizations and teams across the country, where I make sure that they're able to increase their impact, to accelerate their results through those engaging sessions and discovering their unique strengths. And so I really love the work that I get to do with leaders and helping them figure out their leadership style, but also how to use strategic rest as a strategy as well for engagement.
Great. So I'm going to want to hear about strategic rest, but first I would like to focus on leadership and kind of emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
I think that's something that you focus on. Can you tell us a little bit more about the importance of emotional intelligence in leadership, and then how people can go about being better at it?
Absolutely. So here's the thing. One of the things that we have to realize as leaders is leadership is not just about managing performance. It's really all about managing connection, right? And once we get that, we understand that the best leaders create psychologically safe spaces. They also look and provide clarity to people, not just strategy. So one of the best ways to be able to do that, especially since we understand that people bring themselves into the workplace, and oftentimes the best results that we get, or any results that we actually get, as relationship intelligence tells us, is through our relationships that we have with people. So really understanding what that is, understanding beyond just EQ, right? Relationship intelligence is all about, it integrates motives of people, their strengths, and even their communication style in order to be able to get things done. It is being able to change based on what the person kind of needs in that moment, or how they're motivated, how they experience conflict, and being able to use that to shape how to help them do whatever they need in order to get those results that you're looking for. So I love emotional intelligence. I think it's absolutely fantastic, but even deeper than that, which is what I work with my teams and executives about, is that relationship intelligence piece and how to use it to quarterback movement forward, engagement in your departments, and specifically making those strategy moves that helps you make the impact you want to make as a corporation or a team personally.
That is fantastic, and there is a lot to unpack in there. So I'm going to pick out one or two things. Early on, you talked about psychological safety and clarity. And to my mind, being clear both with how you're going to behave and what your expectations are for the other people provides a lot of psychological safety. It's not just being nice. It's letting them know where they stand at all times.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And then also to me, it is also when it comes to relationship intelligence, again, understanding how they're motivated. So I'll give you a perfect example. So I and now of course own my own business, but before that as a senior leader, I had staff members, right? And so as I started to dive deeper into relationship intelligence and understand it better, the first thing is I understood about myself that I'm motivated by a high blend of performance and process. So as we think about relationship intelligence, there's three kind of key motivation value systems that people have a blend of, right? The first one is performance. The second one is process, and the next one is people, right? So I myself have a high kind of blend or high equal blend of performance and process, right? And I have a very low, which makes me sound like sometimes like, what? I can't get it because she presents so extroverted, but I'm motivated by a high blend of people at all, right? So in order to be a good leader, I have to think about that quite often. How does this impact people? All of those different pieces, because it just doesn't come as naturally to me as performance and process, right? Together. So imagine, and this has happened to me, I've worked, of course, in industries where they've been people who are highly motivated by people. So my language tend to center around, these are the goals. This is what we're trying to achieve. We want to be the best. But when I'm speaking to people who are motivated by people, I don't want to talk necessarily about that, even though I'm trying to get the same thing done. I would want to talk to them about how this impacts people, how this would impact students. And I would be able to use that in order to help us all be on the same page, right? If there was someone who was more driven by process, you would want to talk about how this logically makes sense to what's happening. Whereas again, with someone who's highly motivated by people, I would talk about the impact of whatever we're doing on people. So it's really being able to change your view, right, or your conversation based on who you're talking to, but to be able to get the same results. And I have seen so many teams and executive leaders be transformed by this information and having it for their team, having it for themselves so that they can make the impact that they want to make.
I love that. And it sounds like a combination of things that I talk about. For process, it almost sounds like you're talking about putting processes in place and following processes, but also achieving the goals that you want to achieve, which are, the best strategic outcome goals. And then for the people, it's somewhat about the emotions of people, and people who think and are driven emotionally. They want to achieve great things too. They want to achieve great things with their core values in mind and be able to achieve greatness on its way towards achieving the core value, which usually has to do with people.
Absolutely. So it's all about how we're anchored, right? Behaviors that we do, the skills that we use, we have a toolbox full of those, right? There are tons of things that we use every day in order to get things done, even though relationship intelligence tells us that we have some key ones, maybe a top 5, even top 3. And SDI is an assessment that I use in order to help leaders to be able to have this actual information about themselves. It's them, of course, what their top strengths are. Even as we talk about relationship intelligence, what happens when we overdo those things that we often use in order to get things done, how those as overdone strengths can negatively impact the relationships that we're trying to keep intact, right? It also has us understand a little deeper about what we experience in conflict and how there's stages actually of conflict, and that conflict and opposition is different. So yes, right? It is so important for us to kind of understand exactly like the way that people are motivated, because it allows for us, of course, to be able to communicate to them in a different way.
So how do you find out how people are motivated? Is it through observation? Do you ask? Is it a combination?
Yeah. So for me specifically, I use an assessment that's called SDI. So it's called Strength Deployment Inventory. And I use this and give this to leaders and typically their entire team. And then we have a fantastic facilitation that's engaging that I do through my company with them around debriefing their assessment results and really understanding how to use this as a team. So not only does this assessment tell you your personal results, but it also allows for me to use the data as a team so that teams can see not only their top strengths, right? And this is incredibly important, especially as you're reaching goals, as you're doing things as a team, the impact that you're making, because oftentimes I have worked with teams, just most recently, I worked with a team, they were in a state or a kind of a season in their journey where they really needed to get some impact done, right? They had some strategic planning goals that they were doing, but what we actually discovered is naturally as a team, a lot of those strategic or performance-based strengths were actually on the very bottom of their strength pyramid, which tells us a couple of things. When they have to be really performance-based, it can be triggering to that team. It can be exhausting for that team, and they actually tend to avoid it, right? So there provides the conversation about, hey guys, you need to, number one, do a few things in order for you to safely be able to use some of these strengths that are at the bottom of your strength pyramid, right? And also it provided the opportunity for a conversation about whether or not the strengths that they have at the top, how they're using those, how they're perceived by other teams, right, that they may have to work with or other folks. So it provides some phenomenal information that helps teams be able to move forward with strategic planning, with relationships on the team, and just man, one of my favorite things when I do this facilitation with teams is the light bulbs that go off with just understanding each other, right? And also where they may not have understood. So really doing this assessment with teams helps me bridge the gap between what has been happening and of course what can happen in the future now that they actually have language around what they need and how to advocate for themselves, but also how to better understand each other.
Yeah, I love it when I do a few different assessments and explaining them to the group is so much fun because eventually they start pointing and saying, that's right, that's what I do. Every once in a while, I'll get someone who says, I don't think that's right. And the rest of the people at the table are like, oh, that's right.
That same thing happens to me all the time. And I love my favorite thing about facilitating, especially like early in when they already start to adopt the language of what you're talking about in order to talk with each other, is just absolutely, I don't know. I don't even know if I can describe that feeling, but as a facilitator, it just always makes you feel so good.
This is kind of off topic, but I was recently talking about jargon, and it's so effective. Like what you're basically doing is you're teaching them effectively jargon, and it is an incredibly efficient way to explain a very specific thing, which is wonderful once everyone understands it. If you're talking to people who don't understand it, it's easy to fall back into that jargon, and what you really have to do is explain the whole thing, which it can be a challenge going back and forth sometimes.
Absolutely. One of the things, the most underrated to me leadership skills and team skills is really being people who speak the same language, whether we realize it or not, right? Especially when you're bringing in learning and development, creating a new language is always important. I think the best teams that I've ever seen all kind of like understand where the other person is coming from and how they're anchored. And so that is incredibly important that a team not only is on the same page, but they speak the same language.
Yeah. And once you're on the same page and you understand everyone else's strengths and weaknesses, you can supplement your own. Because I may not be good at this one thing, but I know, Joan is. And so when it needs to be that, then you can figure out who to put together on a team for various projects.
Absolutely. And to me, that's also what the most successful supervisors do, managers, leaders, CEOs, right? To me, as a leader, one of the biggest things that you should be doing is removing roadblocks for the experts that you hire, right? If you're getting stuck in the weeds doing all of these different things, I had a client the other day who was explaining to me that someone who is a senior leader in their department, when they asked them about what one of the departments that was under them, what did they do? This person really couldn't tell them anything about what was going on in that area. And that scared the person a little bit, right? And so I talked to them about, yes, this person should have an understanding of what's going on. But I also want you to realize that before you kind of jump to being really, really upset with them, that they may be seeing themselves as someone who, again, removes roadblocks for the people who are doing like the work, right? And so there is tons of space for that as we're leaders, not necessarily always peeking over people's shoulders, but making sure that as challenges come up, that we use not only our networks, our experience that we have, relationships that we have around us in order to make things much easier for the people who we bring in that hopefully are experts at the work that they do. And if you're not working with people who are fantastic at what they do, then you may want to take a look around, because then how do you leave, right? How do you know things are going to be in a good space when you come back? How do you actually have a restful vacation so you come back with clarity and creativity if you're not leaving things in the hands of people that you can trust and that you know will do the best for the organization even when you're not standing right in the room with them?
I love that. I often, when I'm talking to business owners, I will ask them, knowing the answer, I will ask, how many of you can go on a 2-week vacation without checking your emails every day? And they laugh out loud. Like, if you can't go on a vacation without still being plugged in, you don't own a business, you own a job. And your
Absolutely.
job is terrible because your boss is a maniac and it's you.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. That's actually, and I know we're talking about relationship intelligence today, but I actually wrote a book called Strategic Rest and Leadership. And one of the things that inspired that was actually working for a boss who was exactly like you just described, and who I described as someone who removed roadblocks for us, but she would always make sure to hire people who were experts, right? Who she considered as experts at what they did, so that she could always provide information to us. She could always coach us on things that needed to happen when we brought issues. But for her, roadblocks and removing those were incredibly important. So she could leave. That was the first time that I actually kind of challenged hustle culture, seeing this leader who was respected, who had a top department, who had people who were constantly getting awarded and all of these different things. She was trusted in our organization as someone who could take teams, take departments, and create and build and make them much better than they even were, right? But this woman knew how to leave. She would leave and she wouldn't be answering emails. She would say, hey, you've got this. Unless it's a huge emergency, I trust you guys. I've given you the tools that you need, and I believe that you will be okay. And then she would come back rested. Like, it was wild to see a boss who would come back from vacation, but not just rested, right? Which to me is incredibly important. We should be using that as a strategy for leadership. But she would come back because she rested with new ideas, clarity around how to move things forward, around relationships that we should cultivate in order to make the impact that we were trying to make. So her being able to leave, to enjoy her time away, but to really be able to think deeply, which often doesn't happen for us when we're in the office and the daily hustle, made us a better department because strategically she was resting. Right? So yeah, to me, leaders who, I love how you put that. If you can't leave for 2 weeks without worrying about what is going on, then you work a job. You don't own a business. I'm going to be saying that all the time. I love that.
I want a nickel every time you say it.
Deal.
But, I stole it from someone else, so it's all good.
Love that. It's so true.
So I love the idea of rest So this is a great topic. I want
Sure.
to hear more about the book, but I know that I get my best ideas when I am going for a run or a bike ride
Yes.
because I'm not trying to think about work. And I think being outside of work allows you to get outside of the rut that your brain's in. Your brain's in a rut of like, these are the things I need to get done. And it doesn't allow it to float. And for me, running and biking allows my brain to just float. And that's
Yes.
where I'll find things, um, you know, but if you can actually do that on a vacation that's extended, then even better.
Absolutely. Because here's the thing, we have got to get out of the mindset that rest is a reward. Right? We've been taught that forever. Lots of people are like, I just got to make it into my vacation. I just have to make it to the weekend. I just have to. And then things happen, right? They constantly happen. Even times when I schedule things off or go, oh, nothing else will pop up, things always pop up. So if you're not scheduling your rest, then it may not happen, right? So again, strategic rest or rest is not a reward. It's a rhythm that helps sustain results. And we have to start living like that's the case. So yes, when you're going on your run and really scheduling that, right? Because that's what you're doing. Instead of doing something else, you're deciding that you're going to do something that not only makes your body feel better, right? But also that you're having space and time to think through things. It's all about how strategic rest helps leaders recover creatively, not just the energy that happens, right? And so that's why we created that framework to help people do that easily.
Yeah, it's definitely the combination though. You know, all the studies show that you are physically more alert when you're well rested, you heal faster, everything is better.
Absolutely.
You know, the books Bourne Ultimatum and all the Bourne movies. In the book, he talks about sleep as a weapon,
Hmm.
but that's because he was fighting all the time. So if you switch it to sleep as a tool, then I think it's a great thing to say. And rest is a tool. So I think people need to start looking at it that way.
Absolutely. And like we talked about in the beginning about that psychological safety that we need to be providing as leaders, when leaders rest well, they model psychologically permission for the people around them, for their teams, for the people that work with them to also do the same. And so imagine if we lived in a world where we worked with leaders who also not only worked smarter, right, but that worked in a way that modeled the good behavior of rest for their teams. My goodness. I mean, people would be lining up to go to
Yeah.
work every day, right?
So when I worked in corporate America, I thought they ought to have a nap room with, you know, just a bunch of cots and one person to monitor. You tell the person, you know, you can't let them sleep all day. But if someone needs a 20-minute nap on their lunch break, let them have a 20-minute nap, wake them up.
Absolutely. And what we talk about in our book too, and as we found, is that there's so many ways to be able to rest, right? As we think about, so we created the NAP framework in that book, and it's nurture, assess, and prioritize to help you be able to understand how to strategically rest, how to practice strategic rest. But one of the things as we think about nurture, especially as we nurture rest for ourselves, we find that not just sleep is a way for us to be able to do it. Relationships with people, right? Connecting with them. Have you ever had a good lunch with a friend and you end it feeling just more energized than you ever could? Maybe you guys talked about life goals or just catching up, right? So relationships can also help us feel rested. Learning can actually help us feel rested. I share with people quite often that a few months ago, I went to this DJing class, right? And I was not really feeling much energy when I started it, but by the end, first of all, shout out to any DJ out there. That is hard work, and I had no idea. But by the time I ended that class, I had so much energy, and it has everything to do with the same way when I'm learning anything, whether I'm watching a long YouTube video about history or whatever the case is. When I'm learning, I also feel energy. So it goes so far beyond just closing our eyes and getting some snooze in. Rest can also come come from so many wonderful places. And we need to be able to schedule that into the work that we do, because rest has to be a part of our strategy, not just a side note.
And the energy flows both ways.
Yes.
The more energy you have, the better you engage, but sometimes it's the engagement that gives you energy. I do both improv and play volleyball, and they're always at night. And I'm an early to bed guy. So if I have an 8 o'clock show that I need to go to by 7, I'm like, I really don't want to do this right now. I want to go to bed and get ready. And then I get there. I'm like, this is awesome.
Exactly. It just shifts your energy. And so in that, you rested, right? Whether we realize it or not. It's the stuff that gives us energy. I don't mean not doing, when I talk about rest, I don't mean not just doing anything. But hey, sometimes for folks, it really is just kind of taking some time to be able to catch up on a Netflix show and let their mind wander a little bit, even when they're watching that. But when I say rest, it's incredibly important that we understand it's doing what matters most for ourselves in order to be able to grab that energy and to be able to lead with a full tank, because it's impossible for us to pour from an empty vessel, right? So leaders have to make sure that in order to be at the top of their game, one of the best strategies is for them to practice strategic rest and relationship intelligence. To me, that's a combo for success if I've never heard one.
So the challenge with calling it rest is the stigma that it already has.
Absolutely.
So you are in some ways fighting an uphill battle of getting people to accept that. Adding the word strategic is very helpful. I would consider changing what you call it, like energy replenishment, or something that doesn't sound like slacking.
Yeah. That is the work, though, is changing the mindset of many people around the world around rest. It is one of the key components that allows for us to recharge, to bring energy, but also show up as the best version of ourselves, not just at work, but also at home and for the people who matter most for us. So yeah, you're right. It is an uphill battle, but I'm okay putting my helmet on and even taking a sword if I have to.
I love it. And, similar to that is I often have people talk about the different aspects of their life that are important. Could be family, spouse, children, work, hobbies, doesn't matter what it is. You add all of them together and you make a wheel and you put a slice for each thing. And if you ignore one of those slices for too long, that wheel goes flat.
Absolutely.
And it's so hard to drive with a flat tire. So if you think of that wheel of all your things as a tire, you need to keep every aspect of it inflated, because if one of them goes flat, you're not going to be effective.
Absolutely. You're incredibly right. I love that way to think about it. Yes. And it's impossible to keep rolling that wheel if you don't have anything in the tank to be able to roll it with. So I love that.
Perfect. So sadly, we're going to need to start wrapping up. So let me ask you this. How can people find out more about you, about what you offer, and a little bit about your book?
Absolutely. So I love when people connect with me on LinkedIn. So Dr. Erin Wilson, feel free to find me, connect, follow, send me a message if you hear this, and let me know what was impactful. So that's a fantastic place to do that. I also do a show weekly called Power Nap Live to help energize leaders. Every week it's live, so it's tons of fun. So I see folks in the comments and talk with them. We're building a great rest community over there. And so on YouTube, you can also find me at Power Nap Live, and I'd love for you to join and subscribe. And then if you heard that relationship intelligence is something that could help your team, or you'd love to do the assessment, I can do a personal debrief for you, then head on over to my website, designidealconsulting.com, and I would love to be able to support you or your team in that way.
Perfect. I love it. I will put notes in the show notes so that they can find you easier.
Perfect.
And to wrap up, what is one piece of communication advice you think that all of us can benefit from?
And one piece of communication advice that I give everyone, right, is to understand that boundaries are kindness, right? Oftentimes when I talk with leaders, they go, this person isn't doing this or they're not doing that. And the first question I ask them is, have you asked them to do that? And oftentimes it blows my mind, but people have not actually asked for what they want, right? So to me, one of the best pieces of advice is really to understand, to ask for what you want. And that helps you maintain boundaries that allows you to be the leader that makes the impact that you want to make.
I love that. And you're making me think of in buying someone a Christmas or birthday present. And they want you to figure it out for yourself. They don't want to tell you because then it's not special. I'm like, I mean, I'll do the best I can. I'll listen and make an educated guess. But if you really want the thing, you're kind of going to have to ask for it.
Absolutely. Or at least make sure that you're providing space for you to have given information or clues about what that is. But yeah, to me, asking for what you need and what you want is really one of the bravest things that leaders can do.
Yeah. It's not easy, but it's well worth it.
Absolutely.
All right. Dr. Erin Wilson, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing.
Thanks for having me. It was such a joy to be here.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Neuroconversant Leadership. We're over 100 episodes now. And as mentioned, I'm going to be making some changes. So I would love your feedback on what changes I should make, what things I should add, what things I should take away. Please do me a favor and reach out either on LinkedIn or on my email address, which is jdoran@neuroconversantleadership.com. I look forward to hearing your suggestions. Thanks a lot. Until next time, have a great week.